Hello there. Well, this thing came on quick. Okay, yesterday we're going to be reading the second half of Now I See by Vanessa Clark. We're going to get into the good part now. And now we know that she's had the baby, and we now know that she understands his eyes are not exactly right. And she's beginning to try to understand and comprehend that there's a problem with her son's eyes, which is a hard thing to really take in. Let's see. Remember where I left off at. Okay, yeah. Okay, I tried my hardest not to lose it right there in the middle of the reception as I held my baby. Obviously, the reason my aunt had been reluctant to share her concerns with me was because she had not wanted to upset me. Too late. My mission now was to get away as quickly as possible so as not to lose my composure in front of anybody. I just wanted to be alone, to be gone. Anyone who really knows me or who has ever seen me sit through a church service knows I am a huge crier. As much as I hate to cry in front of people, it's kind of funny because I always do. I spotted my brother Justin and made a beeline for him. He could tell that something was wrong, but he didn't know what. Will you hold Aubrey for a minute? I need to call Clay. It's an emergency. I need to use your phone. My phone only had the coverage for the Tulsa area. Without further explanation, I handed Aubrey to Justin and left with his phone. Quickly, I headed off to a quiet area and called Clay. Music was playing in the reception hall, and its sounds and vibrations were carried everywhere. I stood in a hall just outside of the main room where the festivities were being held. The area was mostly vacant. However, occasionally a person would walk by trying to locate the nearest restroom. Clay, can you hear me? He was in the middle of DJing a wedding reception somewhere in Texas. I had to talk uncomfortably loud to ensure that Clay could hear me. Clay, Aunt Catherine says we need to take Aubrey to the doctor because there is something wrong. My voice cracked as I got the last word out, and the enormity of the word weighed on me. Wrong. Something was wrong. What? What's wrong? He was shouting over the music in the background. Go somewhere quiet and call me back. I hung up. I waited. Clay would be getting a song queued up that would be long enough for him to leave the booth for a few minutes to call me back. The phone rang. I answered and quickly repeated our previous conversation. Fortunately, I didn't have to talk as loud for him to hear this time. What's wrong? He repeated. The movement of Aubrey's eyes is not supposed to be like it is. She says it could be a tumor, but she doesn't know. I don't know. She doesn't know. I don't know. We have to go to the doctor. I want to come home. I looked down at the ground as I spoke. Around me, random guests passed by. I knew they probably could hear me. I didn't dare raise my head and make eye contact with anyone as tears were streaming down my face, and the last thing I wanted to do was to have to talk to anybody. I was upset and scared. Suddenly, I was annoyed. I was annoyed with all these people that they were here where I was, and that I was here at this wedding. Everyone was so happy, and I was expected to be happy. I just wanted to be alone. I needed to be home. Clay was immediately upset and worried. I had no answers for him. I got off the phone quickly. I knew my brother would be looking for me, and Clay couldn't talk anyway because he had to get back to his show. On the way back to find my brother, I ran into my dad and his wife, Jan. Obviously, they couldn't tell that I was upset. They could tell that I was upset and had been crying. I stopped only briefly, mentioning something about not feeling well, and continued on my way. Upon finding Justin, I settled Aubrey, who had been crying the entire time Justin held him, and I went to go find a place where I could be alone. Trying to stifle the eruption of tears that slowly spilled over and threatened to explode at any moment, I tried again not to make eye contact with anybody. I didn't want to talk. That would really cause a breakdown. Anyone who did manage to make contact with me as I was on my way out, I quickly let them know that I was not feeling well and I had a splitting headache, which I did have at this point. My daughter Havana was being entertained by family, so that was one less concern. I needed a private place to be alone. I made my way to the bridesmaids' dressing room. It was empty as everyone was enjoying the reception by this point. The room was a little surreal to me. All white with flowers and white flowing curtains. Makeup, shoes, and hair accessories were strewn about on vanities. The mirrors were lined with bright light bulbs, and they must have been emitting heat, or the room was poorly ventilated because the longer I stayed in there, the hotter I got. I didn't really care, though. It wasn't enough to make me leave. I just quietly sat holding Aubrey, watching girls I didn't know come in and out around me, primping in the mirror, reapplying lipstick, fixing their hair, changing their shoes, and laughing about various things that had occurred throughout the evening. I was glad that they had left me alone, and I was glad I didn't know any of them. That way I didn't have to talk to anyone. The plan was to wait until a family member could drive me back to where I was staying as they were leaving the festivities. My grandparents drove me back. They had no intention to stay until midnight. My brother Justin joined me, and Havana and Aubrey were in tow. I was thankful for my brother's familiar and supportive presence, even though I hardly spoke to him during the trip back. I was exhausted, emotionally spent, and I had retreated to a world of quiet thought as I gazed out of the window at the passing surroundings. As we arrived at the home we were staying at, I thought we are leaving. As we arrived at the home we were staying at, I thought we are leaving tomorrow. I couldn't wait to get on the plane headed home and get everything figured out. I don't even remember the flight home to Tulsa. I mean, I know I took a plane, but I don't recall going to the airport, traveling home with the kids, or anything. All I know is that as soon as I arrived home, I called our pediatrician. What is the reason for your appointment? The receptionist asked. My aunt is a pediatrician, and she saw my son at a wedding I was at this weekend. She had seen him 6 weeks before and wasn't concerned, but now she is concerned and says he needs to get his eyes examined because they are moving in an unnatural way. I had successfully word vomited out all the information I could as fast as I could. Okay, so let's schedule an appointment. I realized the lady who had no idea what I'd been talking about. She simply answered the phone and set appointments. The appointment was scheduled. Within days, we were at the doctor's office. I was glad to be there, seeing someone with authority who could tell me everything was fine, just like I had been heard 4 weeks previously and countless times before with my daughter during her well baby checkups. Our pediatrician loved to declare, "Your baby is perfect," upon completion of those exams. I think the pediatrician must have enjoyed saying those words and seeing mothers smile with joy and pride at their perfect child. I suppose all of us mothers, unadmittedly and unknowingly, loved hearing those words more than we realized. Now I knew how valuable that declaration was. It was what I needed to hear and expected to hear, like I always had. Havana and I sat in the waiting room with Aubrey. My mood had settled. No longer was I the basket case that could lose it at any moment, like I had been only 2 days before at the reception. It calmed me to know that I was at the doctor's office, the place where all the questions would be answered and all the facts would be sorted out. The doctor would fix whatever was making Aubrey's eyes move, or he would inform me, like so many other mothers' concerns, that this was nothing to worry about and my son was perfect. Aubrey Clark, it was our turn. 3-year-old Havana, Aubrey, and I were escorted to a room where we sat quietly while the nurse reviewed the notes on Aubrey's file. It says here that there was movement in his eyes, the nurse questioned. Yes, my aunt, who's a pediatrician in California, just saw Aubrey this weekend at a wedding, and she said that his eye movements are not natural. His eyes shouldn't be moving like they are, and we should see our pediatrician. Okay, you were just here for his well baby checkup. Didn't the doctor look in his eyes? Everything was okay, right? The nurse asked casually as she continued to view Aubrey's file. Yes, but she just said his eyes needed to be examined. Okay, the doctor will be in a moment. The nurse quickly left to shut the door. Again, waiting. It always takes a while for the doctor. I felt very calm and at ease. I had never been to a children's doctor and received any unpleasant news. The possibility wasn't even in my mind. It was like you just came here. Doctor would shine light in his eyes, throat and ears, measure his height, weight, and head, and tell me he looked great. Do you have any questions or concerns? The doctor would ask as he completed the exam. I didn't know about this rash that just popped up. Oh, don't worry about that. It will go away in a couple days. Kids get that all the time. The visits really just seemed like a formality to me. I mean, it wasn't like this is where really sick people went. This was the hospital. At last, the doctor came in. I told the story again. He listened patiently, then got out whatever instrument it is that he uses to shine light into the pupils of Aubrey's eyes. Normal, he says. I knew it, I thought to myself. But he still seemed stumped as to why Aubrey's eyes were moving. He is looking at him quizzically and focusing on his eyes. Does he ever look at you? No, he just looks around at everything else, I said. It probably had to be a boy thing, in my opinion. I had never had a boy before, but in my mind, boys were probably more into things than other people. I mean, wasn't that a thing about men? More into tasks or something, while women were more relational? Sounded about right to me. How about his sister? Does he look at her? Well, no, I guess not. Suddenly, I felt slightly embarrassed as I now realized this meant that he was supposed to have been looking, and yet Aubrey had never looked at either of us before. I felt embarrassed that he had never looked, and even more embarrassed that I had never been concerned about him not looking. I'll be right back. The doctor left and quickly re entered with his wife, who was also a doctor at the practice. I held Aubrey in my arms. He was positioned with his chest against me, looking out over my shoulder. Each of the doctors looked inquisitively at him. Both doctors still seemed stumped. Although unspoken, they seemed to be in agreement that the movement was not normal. Otherwise, they would have dismissed the concern and let us go. Yet, they couldn't pinpoint anything wrong or any specific reason why Aubrey was moving his eyes the way that he did. Finally, the woman doctor pulled out a set of car eyes and jingled them near Aubrey. He made a little jumping movement against my body. The keys. I don't think he knew they were there. I don't think he knew about the keys. The noise surprised him, she exclaimed. I was not surprised by Aubrey's reaction. Unexpected loud noises scare babies all the time. The doctor didn't seem alarmed, but contemplative. I'm going to give you the number of a pediatric ophthalmologist, and he will be able to help you. Give us a call and tell us what he says. I was handed a yellow sticky note with a name and number scrawled on it. I thanked the doctors and left. The doctors had seemed stumped, but not overly concerned, and so my mood mirrored theirs. I made Aubrey's appointment with the specialist as soon as I got home. We were able to get in quickly. It was within days of the pediatrician visit. I was anxious to put all these doctor visits behind us. Clay's mom, Grandma Mary, was able to watch Havana, so I was able to take Aubrey to see the specialist by myself. I arrived at the office and checked Aubrey in. There weren't many people in the waiting room, just a couple of parents with young children and babies waiting to be seen. I didn't put much if any thought into what an ophthalmologist actually was. Personally, I had never worn glasses or contacts. Within a short period, Aubrey was called back and examined. I remember very little details from this actual exam. It seemed extremely quick and simple. It mainly consisted of shining light into my son's eyes and having him follow various objects and cards, mainly black and white in color. After the exam, the doctor asked me to follow him. He led me to another small exam room at the end of the hall that had a phone on a table. The specialist politely said, I need you to call your husband and have him come to the office. To which I replied, no, it's okay. He can't. He's working. Sternly, the ophthalmologist said, no, I need you to call your husband right now and have him come to the office. He then left the room and closed the door. I stood there looking at the closed door and felt my eyes begin to fill with tears. I am crying even now as I remember those words. Those are the words that cut into my soul like a knife and told me that something was devastatingly wrong. That's the end of chapter 5. We'll now go into chapter 6 tomorrow. And it's getting good now. We're over halfway through the book already, and I think we can see where this is going. Okay, I wanted to tell this this morning on the Godcast, and I didn't. This Friday, coming up to 24th, Lynn and I are going out of town next week, beginning Saturday. So there will be no Godcasts from next week, beginning not Sunday or all next week. We're going out of town. We can take a little break. Might do a couple of lives from our vacation on my phone, but I'm not going to do an actual Godcast. We're going to take the time off and go get out of the cold weather, get some warm stuff, and have a good time. So anyway, we'll be back tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, with another Godcast and a reading of chapter 6 of Now I See. And have a great day. We love you. Take care. Bye-bye.